You died. And while you wait for your 500 megabyte per second potato laptop hard disk drive to reload, enjoy another episode of Backlog Brain Rot. Today we have a Fromsoft Games special. So, given that straw and parrot, I haven't really been inducted into the fan base yet. I grabbed a few guest hosts to talk about them with me. We have here today Mokey
What's up, fellow tarnished?
and Sam,
Good day, fellow hunters.
Never,
What's up, fellow shinobis?
and I'm Connor. If you're in the Discord, you probably know we ran a top 10 Fromsoft Bosses and top 3 games poll. So the meat of the discussion today will be revealing those results. But to start us off, I wanted to talk about what got us into Fromsoft Games in the first place. If anyone would like to start, go ahead. Otherwise, I can.
I'll go for it first, actually.
Brave man.
I probably have a lot of this, probably a similar story to many, because I feel like I've heard on other shows or just videos on YouTube, people having this somewhat similar experience where I myself tried Demon Souls back in 2013 on my PlayStation 3, and I knew of From Software because my brother had just played Dark Souls, and he did it to completion, and he was like, "Hey, you should like that Demon Souls game is like this. It's just like that one." And I bought it with what money I had at that time, being a lot younger, and I tried it. I got to the second boss, the Tower Knight, and it wasn't clicking by that point, and I knew I liked something about it, but I also couldn't get into it at the same time, so I just completely dropped it. And it wasn't until fast forward 2 years later, I'm in high school and I get my high school job, and I finally start making some money during the summer, and I saw Bloodborne, like a used copy, a few months later after it came out, and I bought that based off reviews, and also like the gothic horror aesthetic seemed right up my alley as someone who just loves gothic horror. And I was just like, all right, like, it's used, it's half off, why not? And that became the game I played like all summer. That's where it clicked. The like very, fast paced, almost like, instead of like being more slow and methodical and strategic with your attacks in Dark Souls, it was like rush in on the boss, rush in on the enemy, parry, like that's where it clicked, and I fell in love with that game. And then I went back and I played Dark Souls and everything else eventually over the years, and fell in love with it from there.
Yeah, the change in aggression in Bloodborne was significant.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Never or Mokey, which one are you?
I can go because it's a good segue, because the first one I tried was actually Bloodborne.
Ooh.
And I tried it because everyone was talking about it. My friends were liking it, so I decided to download it. I think I game shared it off a friend at first, and then I got filtered by the crowd of enemies. And then I promptly deleted the game. I was like, this game is trash. I'm not playing it. A year later, I was like, okay, I'll give it another chance. And then this time, I got filtered by the wolves before the cleric beast. I think.
Oh, man.
I was like, nope. This game is actually garbage. It's unfair. It's not balanced. Ass. I'm out of here. And then 2017 happened. My friend was playing Neo 1, and then I was like, that looks cool. And then he told me, oh, it's a Souls game. I was like, oh no. But I decided to try it anyway. So I got the game, I tried it, and I actually beat it to completion, and I loved it. And I actually kind of get why people like the difficulty. And it's kind of weird because some people think Neo is like harder than FromSoft games, and I can kind of see it. But for me, it was like a good starting point as a beginner. And then for the third time after I beat Neo, I finally went back to Bloodborne, and I finally beat it to completion. And then from there, a couple months later, I was like, I get it. And then I want another one. So then I tried Dark Souls 3, and then I actually beat that one to completion. And then I ended up going back to Bloodborne and bought the DLCs, and then beat that one, and I was just loving it. And then I hopped back onto DS3 again, beat the DLCs, and then I think from there I played Sekiro, and then I went back to DS1, DS2, and then eventually the Demon Souls remake.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Getting a little bit of a thread here. There was very slow starts all around. How about you, Mokey? Did you break that trend?
Yeah, so basically, I got into Fromsoft via actually one of my YouTubers that I still to this day watch and mention all the time, Northern Lion.
Interesting.
He had just a basic straight up Let's Play of Dark Souls 1 in early 2012, so it was a couple months after the game had come out. And I remember watching it and just being totally encaptured by the levels, and then by about 10 or so episodes in, I was like, this game looks so awesome, man. I gotta get this. So I ended up buying the 360 version, and I just pulled the classic get to Firelink. I went left, went to the graveyard, was fighting skeletons for like fucking 4 hours, and I was like, this is insane, man. Like, what am I
I
doing?
did that.
And then I like went back and I was like, there's no way. And I like went back to the videos. I was like, oh wait, I forgot about that little staircase up, or the hill up the right side to actually head to Undeadburg. So once I like got past that, I just ended up playing through Dark Souls 1. I actually didn't finish it on 360. I actually ended up buying the Steam copy.
Yeah.
And that was when it was still integrated with the games for Windows Live. Maybe one of the worst services ever created.
And worst port.
God awful.
Yeah. Well, actually, I did the port itself actually ran pretty well. It was just having to boot up games for Windows Live alongside of it that was just kind of ass.
Yeah.
So I ended up beating the game on Steam, but then pretty much since then I've just been following them as they've released games. Dark Souls 2 and 3 are the two FromSoft games I have yet to play or yet to finish. I've played about half of Dark Souls 2 and plan on wrapping those up at some point. But pretty much when Bloodborne came out on PS4, it was right around. I had just gotten my PS4. It was like, yep, I got to play this, and then Sekiro, just played it on launch, and the rest is kind of history.
Nice. Yeah, I think I wasn't really quite expecting to be one of the earliest people to start looking into the series, but I was initially caught onto the FromSoft formula with looking at previews and reviews of Demon Souls right before Dark Souls came out. It was a little bit like I didn't quite have a PS3 at the time or something like that, so I couldn't get into it immediately. But that year it came out, I think 2011. One of the most prominent things I remember around that time was the IGN article of the Skyrim versus Dark Souls.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Legendary article, incredible. Just the comparisons they made there was like it was literally apples to oranges comparisons.
You couldn't have like picked two totally different games.
I gotta look this up.
Do that too.
Yeah, and I was a big Elder Scrolls fan at the time with Oblivion and Morrowind and all that. So I was really hyped for Skyrim, and Dark Souls was just kind of this thing on the side I was also sort of looking at. Sure enough, they come out. I get them both on Christmas. I put tons of hours into Skyrim, and then gave Dark Souls a good try. I was into it, but I was really bad at it, and so I inevitably got filtered. I did one step worse than the skeletons. Is I immediately went down at Firelink Shrine and found the ghosts and noped out of that, and got filtered by the Taurus demon on the bridge. Like, could not get past that for a year. Funnily enough, my little brother immediately disliked the game when he saw it. He just thought it was the dumbest thing. And then about a year later, he finally gives it a shot, and he becomes the one who gets hooked on it and goes all the way through Dark Souls and becomes a huge FromSoft fan. And so while I'm sitting there being terrible, mind you, I did not beat my first FromSoft game until 2017
Wow.
with Dark Souls 3. So 6 years of me being terrible at these games, but coming back to them constantly because my brother is saying, oh, this is great. We're going to get Dark Souls 2. Oh, we're going to get Bloodborne now. Wait, it's Dark Souls 3. And I never made it like past 10 to 20% until 2017. And then I finally got it. And now I can actually play these games.
That seems pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking a few years to finish one, but then once it all it takes is that first one. I mean, once you're there, you're there.
Yeah, that first time playing a FromSoft game is like, there is something magical about it, but it's also the one you're like the worst at, where you're like, because a lot of people have argued in the past, like, what's the hardest FromSoft, Soulsborne game overall, and then you could usually kind of tie it back to, okay, like, why, like, when did you play this one, and why do you think it's the hardest? It's like, oh, it's the first one I started out with, because I thought Bloodborne was extremely difficult, but I couldn't stop putting it down. I kept dying at Bloodstarved Beast. I swear to God, I spent a whole fucking day of my summer on that boss fight trying to get it. Like, I remember like one of my siblings going to like a soccer practice or something, and they left in the morning like for a game, and came back late in the afternoon, and I was still on the boss, but I couldn't get it down. I was like, I can't, like, this thing, I get close every time to, like, depleting its bar, like that last phase of that fight, and it's but yeah, there is something about that first experience, because that once you get into the groove and figure out how those games work, you could they're still challenging, but it's nothing like that first time.
Yeah, like, who gets stuck on the Taurus demon after they've even finished like 3 bosses in the series?
Or Capra demon.
Yeah. Well, camera is a bitch in that room, so yeah. So there definitely is. There's just a mindset that has to be broken with how movement and timing and all of that works in these games. And then there's Dark Souls 2, which still forces you to try and figure it out.
That game is a mess. It's a
that is a game. That is a sequel to a game.
And on that note, can you guys guess which FromSoft game did not get a single point in the top 3 games?
Dark Souls 2, I'm guessing.
It's Dark Souls 2.
Yeah.
Bottom of the barrel.
Good.
Good.
I want to state, for all I've done slandering Dark Souls 2 is I don't hate that game, but it is a mess.
Yeah, it is a mess, indeed.
There are some things I like about that game, and it's better than a lot of other studios' worst games, I guess. But it's a mess, and it's the only thing about Dark Souls 2 I haven't done is the DLCs, which are like highly recommended.
Yeah, they're definitely better than the base game for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. But with that, the number 3 was a little bit surprising to me. I actually expected this one to get more points, but the number 3 was the original Dark Souls.
Wow.
Ooh.
I will accept top 3. It's 2 positions too low, but I'm just happy that it made the top 3 compared to some of the. I feel like a lot of the recent games, everyone's just, it's like that Zelda effect where it's like the newest game is the best thing that's ever been put to print or gaming media.
Right.
I feel like From Software kind of has that kind of gas going towards it now, where the new hotness is just so hot that everybody, you forget the classics.
Yeah. I struggled either pitting like between Sekiro and Dark Souls 1. I struggled choosing between the two for me personally, but I get if I would not have been mad if the original Dark Souls is number 1. This is how like consistent they are. Is that like any of these games but Dark Souls 2 could have been number 1, and I would have been like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And for context, it got 11 points, and the scoring system was top place got 3, second place 2, down to 1, and there were 14 voters. So that's a pretty decent.
That's pretty good.
It's a pretty good amount of voters.
But the margins on the next 2 were pretty high.
Oh.
I was going to say, for 14 people, only 11 points, it still seems kind of low. So these other 2 have to just be massive.
Yes. There was a clear trend in the votes.
Oh god.
Oh boy.
Oh god.
Any other comments on Dark Souls 1 though before we move on?
It's a pretty fantastic game overall, and I totally, I could replay that game, and that could just go up the list for me next time I play it again. Like, it's such a that game. Someone online once in a video put it perfectly that like the original Dark Souls is our like generation's Ocarina of Time. It
Yeah.
really is this like
Yes, I agree with
transcendent
that.
experience, and
I can agree.
and given the reputation that the studio has now, it's definitely like games like Elden Ring, Sekiro, and their their most recent output could definitely overshadow a bit of what has gotten them here at this point. But
Yeah, the first Dark Souls is like really, really influential. Like, it's like on my list, I think I have it at like number 4 or 5, but even then I still like highly respect that game for what it did, and like how it how it changed the entire industry, and like From Software going forward, like, cuz like the design of that game is just genius.
Yeah. I have a friend who puts this one very high, and he has a good reason for it, and that I fully agree with, is that the map design in the first Dark Souls is the most intricate and the most interesting, where it's the most like Metroidvania-ish
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
them all.
yeah.
subsequent games haven't been able to recapture Dark Souls like that Metroidvania element and like intricate world that it created. And because I like even I love Dark Souls 3, like I probably love it a lot more than some other FromSoft fans who think it's like kind of underwhelming compared to the first one. But I do love that game, but it does not touch that first game's design, and even just how it's all how
Yeah.
you discover it all and what you unlock along the way. It's such a satisfying experience.
And that first half of the game where they force you to walk everywhere before you unlock fast travel,
Yes.
as annoying
Yeah.
as it is, I think it was really important for that.
It's worth it. It is worth it. I have no problem like replaying it and having that knowledge that I have to do that again, because it's like so much fun to
Yeah.
do all of it.
The design of it makes that replaying so easy, because you're just like, oh, I know of these connections now, so I can speed this up.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of fast travel, I'm gonna give a short story. When I first played Dark Souls 1, I did the same thing Mokey did. I went to the graveyard. But get this, I actually got all the way to Pinwheel.
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing. I genuinely did not know you're supposed to go up the stairs. I legit kept going down, and I actually kept going further and further. And I was just like, dude, these enemies are so tanky. What the fuck is wrong with this game, right? And then, and remember, I got no fast travel. And then one night, a friend told me you went the wrong way, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And guess what I had to do? I had to find my way all the way back up. I did. I got all the way to Tomb of the Giants, and it is terrible. I didn't even have a torch. I had to maneuver through the dark and walk my way all the way back. And I finally got back to Firelink Shrine. I was like, no fucking way. Just did all that. But the bosses, doing the right way, I cleared all of them really easily. I was like, okay, this is more like it.
I know you're built different, because I would have just said, oh, time to make a new character.
Yeah, right.
I went all the way back. Not fun.
I can gush a little bit. Dark Souls 1 is my number one From Software game, and I feel like it might just be nostalgically entrenched enough where it will never leave, but I still think, outside of like a personal bias, it captures the atmosphere of like wonder mixed with oppressiveness, just in such a perfect kind of balance that really hits for me. It has a massive sense of scale, and like you could tell that these areas are quite grand and almost grandiose, but they're very pun intended, they're very hollow areas. And it's just such a cool vibe. I mean, it's like, you're coming in after shit's kind of already calm, like shit's already went down, and you're kind of just like there and
Literally
just
in the
seeing the
ashes of the
aftermath.
world.
You're in the remnants, yeah.
And the map design, the interconnectedness, the maze-like thing, and just so many moments of like, I cannot believe that this just looped back into this area.
Yeah.
That I think that even while Bloodborne probably comes second closest to having a bunch of those moments. But I don't think other of their games have like reached the pinnacle of that for me. And they've gotten a lot better with boss designs. A lot of the Dark Souls 1 bosses are like memes in a way, and not super difficult when looking back.
Yeah, still better than Demon Souls.
But it's just, I think it's the atmosphere that carries it the most for me, and just the music, each area feeling very distinct and separate, and just everything. It's just it's one of those perfect games for me.
Yeah, I had it at my number 2 for a lot of good reasons, but the things that always hold it back for me is, one, I can't stand the 4-directional movement when you're locked on. That shouldn't be as big of a thing as it is, but it's just every time I go back to that game, that little bit of it kind of breaks my brain a bit. And then everything kind of looks like mud now.
If that game got a like a Demon Souls styled remake, oh bro.
Oh gosh, that would be.
Keep the same exact design, just bump up the graphics. Yeah. Oh man,
that would be choice. But I cannot fault anyone for holding it highly.
It's my number 4. It just didn't make my top 3, but I could a replay whenever that would happen could send it up the list. Who knows?
Yep. And with that, we move on to number 2, which somewhat surprisingly, I knew this was going to be in the top 3, but I was kind of expecting it to be number 1, the most polished product that FromSoft has put out yet, Elden Ring.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
16 points.
I was expecting that to be number 1.
Yeah, me too, actually.
I only expected that one to be number 1 solely because I knew there were going to be people voting on this that have only played Elden Ring.
Yeah, they got into the series with Elden Ring.
Yeah. So they've only played that, but
for the record, if people had only played like 1 or 2 games, I started their points out at the highest they could. So if they had 2 games, they got 2 points for their top vote.
Okay.
Although that didn't really matter because no one put Elden Ring in their number 1 slot. Unless I miscounted something.
Okay.
Which I don't think I did.
Very interesting.
Okay.
I had to check back because I forgot what I sent you, but I actually put Dark Souls as my number 2, so I'm fake. But my number one is, they're pretty equal. It could go either way. So, but I did not even have Elden Ring in my top 3, so I don't know if anybody else here also did not. But
it's my number 2. But again, like, who knows? A few years from now, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna move one of these up the list, and Elden Ring's now number 3. But I think Elden Ring is like collectively like, there's not gonna be another moment in gaming quite like this, like run of games leading up to this, like essentially what is a culmination of everything we've fallen in love with the last decade and like almost decade and a half of like these Hidetaka Miyazaki developed Soulsborne, as we call it now, genre of games where again, another like thing about Elden Ring was that it was a dream game of mine and friends in high school. Like when Dark Souls 3 just came out, I think I was in 11th grade, and they like my friends and I were talking like after a bunch of us had finished it, we were like, where do they go next? Like they're probably not going to make another Dark Souls, so they're going to do something different. And we were like, oh, do you think they make a Dark Souls game but it's like open world? And then we endlessly argued about like whether or not that could actually work, but a lot of us were on the side of like, we it's such a far out there concept to our minds that like we know we couldn't figure it out, so they probably could. And for years we're like, maybe they might do that, who knows? And then sure enough, there was a leak in like 2019, very like, rumors about this new game of theirs, and when it got announced that was open world, I'm like, holy, like, it's it might actually come true. And then fast forward a couple years later, and when we finally see it, and it's like, there's no way that this game lives up to this hype and
polish
and polish, and it did. And it did.
I certainly was on the doubt train. Every time they revealed something new about it, I was like, oh no, they're gonna try that. Oh no, not another one.
There's no way.
No. Yeah, it's one of those times where, very rare times where I was genuinely excited about a game, but I there was that part of my subconscious telling me like, this isn't like, calm down. Like you need to let them cook. Let it cook. Like just kind of like, you never know what could, like happen. Like there's always that doubt part of my brain, but the part of me was like that was really excited was kind of taking it over.
I think at this point, with FromSoft's like track record, I think I was just full in, and I still am full in on like anything they'll announce and try and tag, especially coming off of like Sekiro as well. It's just like
Yeah.
to hear that they was like, oh, they just come off of super hot action game, that they're going back to a more traditional Souls game with that kind of knowledge coming forward.
Yeah.
So I was really expecting like a level up in the combat, which I think it definitely delivered on. But
I would agree.
hearing about the open world elements and stuff, I think I was just full in. I was just ready for more kind of traditional FromSoft.
Yeah.
It was one of the few open worlds where I actually, and part of it could just be my fervor of open worlds, but not open worlds, a fervor of FromSoft games. But I am really not one for running around a map and doing checkpoint stuff, and they managed to evade that pretty deftly and actually make a interesting world with good landmarks and a good visual identity.
Mm-hmm.
In a way kind of similar to how Dark Souls 1 has that, like, oh, I see the world and I know what I'm exploring. None of it looks generic, right? And they managed to actually get that feeling and get me, who was very burnt out on that stuff, to put 90 hours into it in like 2 weeks.
I was like 130 hours, and it's God, the open world itself. I think this might have been the first time this ever happened playing a game where I saw something where I was like, oh, you can't go there. That's a skybox.
Yeah.
I went there. Not only wasn't a skybox, it was a fully detailed, layered area of complex contraptions and enemies and a boss fight hiding somewhere in there. And that was like one of many moments playing that game in its first in the first 20 hours alone, where I was like, holy shit, they did it. Not only they did it, they've done something beyond this what I was expecting, and it's insane. And they made a game with no quest log either. Like it's nuts.
So Elden Ring, it's my number 3. I've got this game is special to me. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little backstory. So I was really burnt out on open world games around 2020, like 2021. I was getting real burnt out on them. So, but I was really excited for this one, and I was so hopeful that maybe FromSoft could reinvigorate my interest in open world games. And after playing I think it was the alpha. They did an alpha or beta. I forgot what they called it, but I played that, and it was
the network test.
Yeah, the network test. Yeah, it was great. And I was like, this open world's pretty sizable, right? Because they give you that first area, and I'm like, wow, this could be big. So for those who don't know, I actually got the game 2 weeks early from a source, let's just say, and I was also playing the game early with 2 other friends who I will not name, and me and those 2 friends, we talk about it a ton, but that playing it early was such a special thing because it was just us and a couple other people who had it early, and there were no spoilers out there. There were no guides, and we would just share what we found, and it was so insane. So, like, going to like one map to another, I'm like, oh my god, this shit is big. And I one of the best moments of that game, my 2 favorite moments was we all experienced this. We found that elevator in the middle of the woods, and we took it, and it kept going down.
Yes.
And I'm like, guys, this is a really long loading screen. What is going on? And then I'm like, no fucking way. It's a literal fucking empire underground with like a space ceiling or some shit. And
that's so pretty.
That shit was wild, and I couldn't believe they let you explore that entire thing. And there's a whole underground map. And then the second one, this was still before release. Okay, I was very far into the game. I think I beat nearly every Elden Lord. I just need to do the final boss, and I was like, dude, this map is huge, right? And then I found the secret map which leads to Millennia. And I told my 2 friends, I'm like, guys, there's no fucking way. They did it again. There's another fucking map to the north, and I figured out how to get there. And it wasn't just a small. It was like this snow area, and then that little like ghost town thingy, and then you solve the puzzle, and then I found another map, and then it was the fucking tree. I was like, dude, I was already telling them, there is no way this game does not get like a 97 on Metacritic when the embargo drops. There's no fucking way. And then I got to the end, and I found Millennia, and I was like, oh my god, that shit was so difficult. And then after that, I ended up beating the game, and I was like, oh my god, this is like a special experience I will never like have again. Even if I like, because I replayed Elden Ring like 3 times. And it never hits as hard as the first time, because that first playthrough is just so magical, finding everything like without a guide, without spoilers, like no one telling you anything. You just find it naturally. It's insane. Like,
Yeah, you're honestly reminding me of so much of the specialness of this game. I forgot because I got 90. I was doing it first week too, so I was discovering a lot of things that weren't widespread in the community, like Hoarfrost Stomp being just completely broken.
mm-hmm.
I was ahead of the curve on that one. That was really fun, but I got through the whole game, 90 hours, did Millennia, did all that, and did not realize that I missed an entire Elden Lord.
Oh my god.
The one in the volcano?
Oh yeah.
I didn't even know he was in the game until like 2 weeks later.
Wow. Dude, the volcano one was funny because I was like, because I remember I saw the volcano from a distance. I was like, I was like, okay, it's Elden Ring, I can get there, and I didn't know how to get there. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just a set piece. And then like a couple days later, I actually got there. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, there's even a fucking dungeon in this volcano. Like, and then that whole ass Elden Lord boss fight with that really sick cinematic and shit. It's like, wow. Like, even in a volcano.
I went all around the volcano.
Yeah. It's like, what the hell? Like,
yeah, and even when it got to the point where they were reusing bosses in a lot of the dungeons, those late game dungeons where they started breaking, the physical space, where it's just like, oh, you walk through this room and then go through this teleporter, and you're in the back of the area, except it's not. It's actually a different area with the exact mirrored layout, and all the enemies are in different spots. So now you're going through this teleporter puzzle, and it's just like they kept pulling stuff like that got more convoluted as the game went on. It was amazing. I loved it. Even though it was now reused assets, it was just like, okay, we took that and then we turned it up to 11.
Mm-hmm. I actually I'm one of the few people that actually doesn't mind the reused like bosses and stuff, because like Elden Ring has like 140 unique enemies. I'm just like, name another game with 140 unique enemies. Like,
the worst example of the reused assets is in Dark Souls 2, where you could clearly tell there's a lack of actual variety and content, whereas like Elden Ring, it's like, like they're not. You can kind of understand at a point. There's like, you can so much has been already exhausted on the dev team. They're just like, all right, like it's for it's a pretty amazing experience, and I could forgive a little bit of those elements given how much content and how much you could just spend in that world.
Yeah, and even if the challenge that they gave you to get what was in the dungeon wasn't like mind-blowing anymore, they would still consistently give you these interesting weapons and armor and spells and gear would be in random spots. So I was always excited to get to a new dungeon, because I could literally be one weapon away from completely changing my playstyle, which I did at least like 3 major gameplay changes throughout, where I started as weep stick, bleed bashing, caveman, katana boy. And then at some point I found a frost scythe and some cool armor, and then I became the Hoarfrost Stomp spamming scythe wielder, and that was a lot of fun. And then I went into full Sailor Moon, and I found that giant Estelle, the giant space bug dude.
Oh yeah,
dude!
Yeah.
What the heck is that design? That was cooked.
That's a design for sure.
And he gives you that star flail.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That thing is insane.
Yeah, so I grabbed the star flail. I went and respec everything in the magic. I had like 80 sorcery or whatever by the end of it. And then I find wondrous flask for the magic points, and then I got the laser spell, which was just on someone's
Broken.
corpse around the volcano. I was like, oh, I can get 15 seconds of continuous high damage Kamehameha.
Kamehameha is insane.
Yeah, and then the mimic tier on top of that. So the mimic is Hoarfrost stomping while I'm Kamehameha. It's like,
that's such
Melania.
a broken build. Oh my god! Before they kind of patched
Yeah.
some stuff, like,
And I got through the game before those patches hit.
oh my god,
Melania was not difficult.
Oh well, yeah. Well, more on that later, I suppose. But
yeah,
yeah,
it was a game. I honestly was starting to forget. I probably should have put it in my top 3, but I have it at like 4. Any last comments before we move on to number 1?
Can't wait for the DLC expansion.
I don't want to. Yeah, I guess there's just on one last note of Elden Ring. Yeah, like I guess there just won't be a game quite like this. God knows ever again. Who knows?
It'll be a
but
while.
It's going to be a while, and I don't know. It is one of those rare occasions where a dream game of mine came true, and it just really like has changed so much going forward for everything. Like it's going to be interesting to see how it affects games going forward. Like what studios are going to be inspired by it in some shape or form, and I've already seen dev interviews where they've talked about like how Elden Ring is going to inspire them going forward, and we'll see how that shapes out. But yeah, I
hope they learn the right lessons.
You learn exactly. It's always learning those right lessons and what they actually take away from it. If they why this game is as special and revered as it is, and why this is like almost an important moment for games, I guess, at this point. But yeah, just a truly that's the thing. It's a game I could talk about for hours and hours on end, and like those particular moments never talked about are literally similar experience of that sense of wonder and discovery. And sure, it's gone on repeated viewings, but I feel like now that you know where like a lot of the weapons and items and stuff are, and like you can, and there's so much, like, it's in a way it's like arguably the best FromSoft game because it has the most like variety in its combat and builds. So much you can mess around with and tinker with, and you can reset your stats and have entirely different character. Unfortunately, you have to grind for all those materials to upgrade some of those weapons, but holy shit, man! Like weapons like the Moon Veil, and like just before they patched it,
I love the Moon Veil.
Just like hell, like even just using the great sword again, like being a great sword Chad, and messing around with that in Elden Ring for like endless amounts of hours and all that stuff. Like I'm always a strength build in these games because I want the challenge and I want to feel like I'm barely making it out alive in every any chance. But yeah, just truly special game. Shout
out to Addie's favorite man, Neil Druckmann, who said who not only gave
I wasn't going to mention that, but now that you brought it
up, who not only nominated this man for like Time Person of the Year or whatever, he also said like his next game he kind of wants it to be kind of like a FromSoft game. So shout out to him. That'll be interesting to see.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And with that, what could possibly be number 1 this server? At 22 points, I was expecting Sekiro.
Oh.
It was not Sekiro.
Wow.
In fact, 2 people put Sekiro in their number 1 position. That was Alex and Never.
Yay.
More on a theory I have about those 2 later.
I could probably guess what number 1 is.
Yeah, number 1 has to be very obvious now. Like,
voted on. How do you know that this community spun off from a PlayStation podcast? Well, by seeing their number 1 FromSoft game. It's Bloodborne, the PlayStation 4 exclusive.
I'll take it. I put that one at number 2.
That's my number 1. I mean, like, shocker. That's my number 1 after my story at the beginning of the episode.
6 people put Bloodborne as their number 1.
Let's go.
Wow.
Yeah.
6 chads. Giga chads.
It was I mean, I didn't vote for it because of the three of us, or no, four of us here, I have not finished Bloodborne. I got halfway through, but I got really busy with work in college, and then by the time I came back, I could not handle the frame rate issues anymore.
Jim Ryan has to
Yeah.
fix this. What's he
And
doing?
not. I tried. I'm officially broken now because in that time I got 144 hertz monitor on my computer and I started learning what it was like for things to actually be smooth and responsive, like truly smooth and responsive. Can't play Bloodborne
I
anymore.
got a
It's
I got
very
a funny anecdote to that. I have a 165 hertz monitor, and I've seen the glory of this high frame rate fidelity on PC, and I've been there, but I could always go back to Bloodborne and still play it at its god awful frame pacing, and
yep.
still love every second of it. I
I
am
envy
broken
you.
in I am broken in the opposite way, I suppose.
You and Parrot and all of you, I'd have some envy, but I'm just gonna keep expecting better.
I expected this game to be number 2. I was expecting Elden Ring to be number 1, honestly,
me
after
too.
what I mentioned earlier about just how like that seemed to be the game that most people have played and not the rest of them. But I mean, yeah, like I mentioned it earlier, this is the one that clicked with me. I love the gothic horror setting, like I mentioned. This also has one of my favorite moments in gaming, which is the halfway point of this game, which if anyone listening out there still hasn't beaten this game,
Like me.
like Connor, please, yeah, if you don't know what happens midway through this game, just get to play it. Hopefully you get to experience that moment, because playing that in 2015, I was like, holy shit, like it is probably, yeah, this is also, by the way, like my 5th favorite game of all time. I should have probably just mentioned that from the top. Like this is truly I think this reminded me during my teens about like why I loved video games to begin with. And like it felt like when I got my hands on this game and played it for the first time, I was like, despite how crushing and challenging it was and how much I was getting my ass beat, it was like I feel like this game was like calling to me. Like this was something I always wanted in some shape or form. Like it was like some like idea of a Castlevania game I always wanted as someone who loved like that
That's a
kind of
good point.
gothic horror aesthetic, and also that just a 3D version of like more developed version of that kind of genre and game. And I love like the soundtrack. All the boss fights in that game are horrifying and
Fucking keto.
disgusting. They're, yeah, Kino, but just like absolutely vile and gross, and I love every second of it. There's like I still have Vicar Amelia's scream stuck in my brain. Like I can almost hear it right at this second. Like, you know, like it's one of the most important video game experiences to me personally. And also like the weapons in the game,
They're
like
so cool.
the saw blade, like, you know, like the Ludwig's holy blade, like it's a sword, but it turns into a great sword too. Like it's got my favorite weapons. Like all the outfits in the game are amazing. Like talk about
Yeah.
another, like we're talking about all these games I can gush about for hours, but I'm trying to condense it as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's almost
This was
hurtful.
this was a game that even from what I've played, I know that they pared down to go up. They took out a lot of the kind of useless things that you'd find in Dark Souls, like, oh, it's a broken sword, or here's another variant of a long sword. And they're like, no, no, no. You get one of each interesting type of weapon, and it's got extra tricks with it. And then there's like a bunch of set of, the armors and clothing is just like that. Each one has a distinct thing it's going to do. They're not going to have as many, but everything has its purpose. And so when you find it eventually, it's really significant. And I really love that part about the reward system in that game.
Yeah, it's like one of the most rewarding game experiences. I've played it many times now, and I've platinumed it, and like there's some minor issues I have with it. I think the Chalice dungeons could have been a bit more it was definitely a proof of concept for something that, obviously is in Elden Ring. And even Elden Ring didn't do it perfectly either, but I do they're like one of my favorite gaming experiences was going in the Chalice dungeons, and the difficulty spikes in that is absolutely unfair. And
Yeah.
I had my brother join me on co-op for some of the like bosses that like the level scaling is kind of broken in the Chalice dungeons. It's nuts. I was like, I was grinding for that platinum for a while, but it was worth it. And yeah, also just has my favorite FromSoft ending too.
Yeah, the bread and butter of Bloodborne for me is the trick weapons. I think that I was really hoping that would come back for Elden Ring.
Same.
I think that was that was one aspect that might be keeping Elden Ring a little down for me. Is I was super hopeful, but yeah, the fact that you can have a weapon that it's two different play styles and you don't even have to change anything about it. It like play, it's just every weapon feels like a hybrid and has multi-purpose. It's just super awesome. It gives you a lot more almost like combo potential.
Yeah.
Because it was nice that they had like a weapon, you'll have like a cleaver and then it'll transform into like a long pole with a cleaver end. And there's kind of like a special attack that is the transformation attack. And I think that was just a super good idea because their whole thing was to make the combat more fast paced, no more sword and board. It's very funny that they give you like a piece of shit. Piece of shit piece of plywood that the fucking guy found like in an alleyway. So they tell you right away that like, yo, this game is not play like Dark Souls 1 and 2. Like we're not. It's totally different. The pace of combat, the whatever you want to call it, the revenge system in order to regain health once you've taken damage. So just I had skipped. Well, I just had not touched Dark Souls 2 because I didn't buy a lot of games, and so I had Dark Souls 1. So I like played through that a bunch, and so the transition of Bloodborne it took a second to get there, but
it does.
Once I just literally. And the Bloodborne's only main flaw is the healing system. They should have just stuck with Estus or something like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Having limited heals, Dark Souls 2, this game, and I think one other has like a
Demon Souls
life gem.
Demon
Demon Souls has healing grass. Those are like, once they should have just realized Estus is fucking goated. It makes so much sense as opposed to having to grind for heals. So
yeah, you just change how much Estus you have and win.
But grinding for heals off those the big oafs that hold bricks, those big giants kind of at the beginning. And, those guys were the learn to parry enemies for me because I would always just go back to that area, kill them for health vials, and I would only practice my parries there, and then eventually you get good, and then that game, the map design is pretty close to Dark Souls 1's. It's not as connected, but most of the areas are just designed with so much tact and grace that it feels amazing. Everything feels unique, and it's just dripping with atmosphere. I think
the Gothic style is so cool.
It's fucking amazing.
So much my favorite thing about it.
Yes, depending on your preference, it's incredible.
If Dark Souls was like walking into a world that, like you mentioned earlier, Mokey, was like a world where shit already went down and you're just experiencing the remnants of it. You walk into Bloodborne and shit's going down, and it feels like you woke up into a nightmare.
Yeah.
It is the inverse. It is the inverse to the Dark Souls experience, and I adore it so much. It is a wonderfully fun, horrifying experience.
Yeah, there are a lot of games that try that wake up in a nightmare kind of experience, but Bloodborne's one of the few that I've played where it actually felt like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare.
It's like, what the hell am I in?
Yeah. And just the fundamental change with the gameplay to the aggressive style is what I've been wanting them to do again. And Sekiro is very close, but I love the balance they hit with Bloodborne. I want to get into
the gun. The gun parry is like such a step, like a cut above. Like I still like find the parrying in that more satisfying than like because like you can't really parry in Elden Ring. There are some enemies in Elden Ring that are designed like they were meant for Bloodborne or Sekiro because they come at you so fast and you can't like there's no room for error with those enemies in that game. Like you really have to nail your dodges and understand their move patterns. And
I think a quick step is way better than a roll just
Exactly. Yeah.
hands down.
Yeah. I love I've seen some people online not prefer that quick step, but I adore it. Like I just love how that game plays, even with the performance issues. I can always just go back to it.
An understated element of From Software games is their equivalent of like a vine boom, but for parries. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When you hit the parry, it's literally like a vine boom. But
Yes.
just
Oh my
different.
god.
There's something nobody ever talks about this. One of the most like satisfying oral sound, like oral feedback loops ever is just, especially in Bloodborne though, when they, they're coming up to you. It's so funny that Bloodborne's mechanic system is based on just shoot them in the fucking face. As soon as they get close to you, just light their ass up, and then they'll be like down for a huge attack.
Gosh, they're so cool.
But yeah, that sound effect is just peak among. There's so much good sound design in From Software games, but I just had to shout out the parry, and even in like the Dark Souls or Elden Ring, it's a little different parry sound, but it's still it's so good.
And then you just shove your fucking like hand inside their like heart or whatever. It's just like what?
Yeah,
and then you just like pull it out. I'm like, what the hell?
Gain some blood back. Yeah, that blood feedback is so good. But yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. You had a point, Never?
Yeah, like Bloodborne. The reason it's my second favorite, it was my first From Software game that I beat, and I fucking loved it. But and I still think it has my favorite aesthetic and like world design and lore, because like there's not many games that nail like Lovecraftian horror like Bloodborne does. Like like everything from like the architecture to the enemy designs. Bloodborne has like still the peak From Software enemy designs. That's why like I really want a Bloodborne 2 so badly.
I just need 60 hertz.
Yeah,
Fix the frame pacing.
It's so insane because like the monsters, like the way they like crash on, like stomp on the ground, or like like,
they're so cool.
And then you just see like all the fucking blood. When you like progressively kill more and more enemies without resetting, and then your character's just covered in so much blood too. Like like the atmosphere is just so good.
Yeah.
One more key element of FromSoft that I think everybody kind of recognizes it, but it does get talked about, is there's always kind of an emergent silliness to so much in FromSoft games DNA, in terms of just either the enemy interactions, especially with ledges. Everybody always has a story of some enemy like yeeting themselves off a ledge, and it's just hilarious. But it's just like the enemy design, they have such interesting, like there's always just like weird little like gremlin creatures in some of the games, and just there's always just some like inherent comedy that comes either with jank animations that just work, or the enemy AI doing something silly, or you doing something hilarious. Like everybody always has like a FromSoft horror story, but I think they almost always have like a just hilarious FromSoft moment as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. They like recognize that there are rough edges on their game, but they let them kind of be these points of levity with, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but more so than a lot of jankiness in games, that jankiness becomes these really funny moments that are just as memorable sometimes.
It's a funny effect in terms of, and it's prestige TV is the same way, where it's like some of the most highly regarded prestige television shows like The Wire, Sopranos, Breaking Bad have a heavy meme community. And you just think like Breaking Bad, it's reaching that SpongeBob point where almost every single scene of Breaking Bad has a meme attached to it. Yes. And I think there's some of that DNA is in FromSoft too, where there's so many FromSoft memes out there, and it's just like it's awesome to see. I love that.
Our really Discord channel was originally meant, like that FromSoft channel was originally just a shit post of
literally, yeah.
It's all it was for the longest time, and now it's more active.
Now it's transitioned to something entirely different, where it's just become the center point of do you have anything you're getting filtered by? Go post about it in the FromSoft chat. Doesn't matter what it is.
If you're angry and feeling vitriolic against a video game, do it here.
Everyone's just going to post filters on you, but just get it out, man. That's where you do it.
We need to like get a filter meme, but like Photoshop Miyazaki on it.
That's that'd
That'd be so fucking funny.
I still love that drip filter.
That's still
That's the best filter emote I've seen because it's even got that pun of it's literally a filter
Yeah.
with drip
dripped
in.
out.
You know? Like you just pulled it right out of the oil. Yep. Well, I really hope to get through that one soon. Couple of extra points on the votes. The number 3 slot was actually kind of just remembered was rather what's the word I'm looking for? There was some vying there. There's some there was almost contested. Yes, the number 3 slot was rather contested with both Sekiro and Dark Souls 3 at 10 points. So just 1 point different from any of those being the third spot.
Yeah, I have Sekiro in my third spot, and I'm very curious because I think I lean more towards a Dark Souls formula. So I'm curious if when I play Dark Souls 3, I will slot it above Sekiro, but I don't know. Sekiro rips. We didn't really talk about it, but much to Never's chagrin, but
Oh, we'll have a chance.
that game fucks, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of bosses are going to show up.
Yeah.
It's funny too that it probably will have the highest amount of bosses that people like, but may not end up as like the culmination of their favorite game.
Yeah. I would just say here and now that I think the weakest point for Sekiro of why it doesn't hit the same levels is because the world design is not even the view, like visually and even in some of the arrangement, the world's fine, but the way you interact with the world outside of combat can not hit as high as what I think it is.
Doesn't have as much opportunity for like emergent, I don't know, scenarios. Like everybody goes a different route, but you kind of have the similar. It's not as variable of an experience, which is fine because it's tight and it's damn near polished to a T.
Yeah. But it just does like the combat really well, and everything else is about the combat, so it's not quite as multifaceted.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Dark Souls 3 is a funnier one. It just, I don't know. It's my number 1, but
oh damn,
I love Dark Souls 3.
I love it because of the aesthetic.
I love it too. I think it's a bit. It doesn't have that the interconnectivity and that Metroidvania, but the world design we were gushing about earlier about the first game for me. So it's kind of that part is kind of lost, but it does have some like amazing boss fights. It's got amazing art design and direction, and the music's great. The DLCs for Dark Souls 3 are really
they're pretty darn good,
really awesome. Oh, I didn't even mention earlier to my Bloodborne one, but that's my favorite DLC of the bunch and why it elevates Bloodborne for me as well.
Same.
But overall, and a note on Sekiro, like it's funny that game did take a bit of time to connect with me, but when it did, it really did, and I adore that game too. Like again, like I said at the top, the only game I don't really adore from the Soulsborne stuff they've been releasing is Dark Souls 2, and and Sekiro excites me too going forward because I hope they do take different approaches like that again going forward and do different types of games, even within the formula that they've created, because I do think like I just love how fast and kinetic that game is as well. And some of the boss fights in that game are among some of their best as well. Like it isn't like their boss fights have gotten worse over time. There's always some like they reach new heights with these new releases. Like there's always a new people have a new front runner for some of their favorite fights of all time. And I think Sekiro also has one of the best, like there's a point in the game you reach early on where it like tests everything you've learned up to by that point, and that like in a boss fight, and that fight unfortunately just didn't make my top 10. But I adore Sekiro.
And Dark Souls 3, it's like for me the ideal just sit down casually play action RPGs, like what I want, where it's not this big sprawling open world. It's a pretty contained, like it's not going to take you all that long to get through. Once you know it, you can do it faster. It's got all the polish, or just enough of the polish in the Fromsoft formula that I have no complaints. It never also quite reaches any of the same highs, but I also just really love the way it looks.
I love the way it looks too.
FromSoft always nails like the aesthetic of each of their worlds. It's like
Yeah.
so unique, and the sense of skill.
Dark Souls 3 has become like the cozy action RPG for me, which is a very weird spot for that game.
I mean, honestly, there's parts of Elden Ring where it felt just cozy wandering around
Yeah.
and taking in the vibes, but I get it.
There's just almost too much to bite off when you play Elden Ring, where it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't feel that same sense of containedness of like, I can just play this much and be happy.
You want to hear something weirder? I think
Sure.
Sekiro is my I guess is the term my comfort game.
I can see
Yeah.
that.
I can see
Yeah.
that.
I could see that.
Well,
yeah.
and it's weird because like it, mainly just refining the final boss because like that shit is Kino, and like it's weird because
Yes.
that final boss when you first do it, it is so stressful. Like
It is hard.
yeah, when that game released, that boss was stressing the fuck out of people. Like all my friends who I've watched play Sekiro, they're always stressed at the final boss, and it's
Mokey
yeah.
never got to see me go through that.
It's just so
Yeah,
weird
that was something.
that I consider a comfort game now.
It's like a rhythm game.
It is, yeah.
You know? Once you learn the
Really
dance
is.
routine, then that's it. You've learned the routine, and now you can go through it
Mhm.
comfortably. Yeah. And then final point on the top 3 games, Demon Souls had 5 points with 3 votes.
Good.
And that was about it.
Yeah, I love Demon Souls, but it definitely feels like the Dark Souls was the game, the better version
Right.
of it.
Yeah, it feels like a prototype.
Which it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost calling it a prototype feels like an insult, but honest, it is.
Well, as an engineer, that's a
Yeah.
meaningful thing.
It's just
to
because
me.
like it's such a great. It's one of the better prototype proof of concepts for a game I've
Yes.
Mhm.
played because like it's better than a lot of like I think of like the original Legend of Zelda to Link to the Past. Like there's such a jump in quality there. But same with Demon Souls to Dark Souls, but man, playing Demon Souls remake, I was like, yeah, this it's got its caveats, and there's things that hold it back from being like a lot like as good as their later games. But man, it's such a great experience too.
Yeah. And Demon Souls Remake is such a great case point for, hey, look, some of these older games, they are limited as from a game design standpoint, but just give them a fresh coat of paint so modern audiences can enjoy them. It really does make a difference to put that coat,
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
option to have that coat of paint on. And it can be a really fun showcase for developers too, to show off their engine tech without having to worry about all the gameplay stuff.
I was so happy with the remake that because I'd never played the original Demon Souls, but the one thing I wanted was I just hope they keep everything exactly the same with just minor tweaks to whatever makes quality of life better. But and I was glad they completely did that because I like when I played it, that was probably my favorite remake ever, and it was still a really fun game, and all the issues with it were I could definitely see it from the original, but I was still happy that it was there because like it was like a piece of history, like
Yep.
seeing how it led to Dark Souls 1 and how they continually improved with each game, except Dark Souls 2.
Yep, for sure. All right. So, with that, I think we can now get into the what will probably be a little bit faster point for point, but the big one, the top 10 bosses. I think I'm going to go ahead, since we're about hour in already, I think I'm going to go ahead and list off the first 7 in rapid fire. Then if we have anything we want to say, we can go over that. We can stop and chat. And then we'll hit the top 3 in a little more detail.
Okay.
Sound good?
Fair enough.
All right. Yeah.
All right. So there were a total of 62 different bosses that were voted for, which
Wow.
between 14 people, I'm actually impressed it was only that much because it could have been 140.
Yeah.
Had unique lists. And that would have still only gotten like half the bosses in the series, I think. Actually, that would have been a good number of them, but still. So, starting from number 10, we have Ornstein and Smo, 23
Ooh.
points
Oh.
across 6 votes.
Okay.
Oh, and like the other one, if it was your first pick, that was 10 points. Your bottom pick was 1 point. Linear scale.
Got it.
Lady Maria at number 9.
Oh
And
my
this is one
god, I
had
forgot
it
to put her
done.
on mine. Fuck.
That was my number. That's my number 2.
Aw,
She
shit.
made it at least. You made it.
28 points, 5 votes.
Whew.
Number 8, Orphan of Koz.
Damn,
29 points.
Let's go.
4 votes.
that was number 2 on mine.
So people like that more. Number 7, surprisingly, Melania. 29
good.
points.
That was my
5
number
votes.
7.
That was my number 6.
She had low deviancy in terms of where people put her to where she actually ended up in the top 10.
I just want to quickly mention, not a story or anything. Fuck her, but she's one of the greatest fucking fights
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, weirdly, her position makes a lot of sense, even though I agree with you. Then after that, Slave Knight Gale.
Oh,
That was my number 3.
yo, same.
32 points, 5 votes. Oh, and going back a little bit, Melania and Orphan both tied for their position at 29.
Okay.
Damn.
Okay.
All right. Number 5, Ludwig. 39 points,
Okay.
5 votes.
My number
I
1.
wanted to put him somewhere in there, but I could not.
And then for the last of the group, Nameless Keen. 40 points, 7 votes.
Interesting.
Damn.
Yeah. So a bit of unexpected stuff there. I'm actually kind of surprised Ornstein Smoke barely managed to stay in the top 10.
Thank God.
They deserve it.
Yeah.
They
They do
deserve it.
deserve it. They're goated.
Orenstein and Smog are like, yeah, like that's the first they did that, or not the
They
first
are
time
a
they did
filter
the.
group for the.
They are the filter point for so many people playing the original Dark Souls, like in the like kind of I guess like towards the middle, second, later half of the game, where we mentioned earlier, like the what was it, the gargoyles early
Yep,
on, or
the gargoyles are the first filter.
yeah, they're the first filter, and then they were like, yeah, we're gonna do that again, but like we're giving you a guy that like flies at you with a spear, and then another guy who's like a big, not too slow, but slow,
Rocking a hard place.
rocking a big hammer. Oh, and by the way, they're like, you're like a pebble to them. Like they're like 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
You know, like
And once
like
you
20
kill
Yeah.
the first one, the
Yeah.
other one gets souped up.
again, like that. Ornstein and Smaug are like another great example of like their second act twists in a boss fight,
Yes.
where that happens, where you take one down and the other, the fight just becomes absolutely unholy.
I gotta listen to my brother get filtered by this one so much.
Oh
Oddly
man,
enough, I didn't have that much of an issue with them when I went through.
Same.
a bit of sweat for me with those two, but God, was it satisfying beating them.
When I was about to get to them, Maddie was telling me you're gonna get filtered so hard, and then I got in there and I beat it first try.
Yeah, there's two types of people
Yeah.
with those two.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that.
Uh-huh.
Never Slave Knight Gale, who's regarded as like
Oh
maybe
no.
him and Melania are regarded as like the hardest boss fights in all of From Software
Uh-huh.
games. Slave Knight Gale. So I streamed my replay, like I Twitch streamed my replay of Dark Souls 3, and I never did the DLCs when I was doing this
Mhm.
replay. So I did the DLCs. Sister Freed's the one that filtered me,
Yeah.
and Slave Knight Gale I beat on my second attempt.
Holy
and
shit.
to this day, my brother is still in awe and doesn't like he thinks Slave Knight Gale is like the hardest fight he's ever done in a FromSoft game, and he's better than at games than I am. So like when he told me that, I was like expecting the worst. Second attempt,
Wow.
I got him almost like no hits too. Like I was like I got into a rhythm with him, and I knew what he was doing. Like it just clicked.
I barely even remember the Slave Knight Gale fight, to be
The-
honest.
That arena
yeah.
is just so good. Just the post-apocalyptic setting in the desert, and he's
That is
just
true.
eating on
Remember
like
that
someone's
much.
corpse. I'm like, oh my god. For Ornstein and Smo, I did not have them in my top 10. Instead, at number 10, I had Sister Freed and Father Aaron. That's actually my favorite gank fight, because it was like
Yeah,
way harder, and
that was a
the
fun one.
second phase is insane. Like
That fight, sure, I loved, but fuck, I hated my life during that fight. That fight in particular really like brought back the anger I had. Like it brought back that rage I had during my first playthrough of Bloodborne, where I was getting like absolutely demolished. It was, and same with Melania too. But I love that Melania fight as well. And you mentioned Orphan of Cause as well, which is like such a fitting end to that DLC, an absolute disgusting monstrosity that screams and charges at you like just that absolute menace. That fight is a menace, and I had Lady Maria made it to 9, which awesome. That's my like second favorite FromSoft fight like ever. I love that fight, and the clock tower. And it's not even just like that whole fight alone, but after you finish that fight and you go into the final area outside the clock, it's like I was like, holy shit, where did I just go? Like that's like, yeah.
I have some nice deep lore really quick on the top. Well, Bloodborne DLC was kind of eaten in this first half of the boss list,
Yes.
but Orphan of Costs, the soundbite of that scream is a public use, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
public
public
domain
yeah.
sound effect, and that sound effect is also used in Pizza Tower.
Oh my god!
I can totally see it, because I remember there being a scream in Pizza Tower that I heard and went, that sounded a little bit like, oof. It's a little special.
Dude, that opening cinematic of like when you get into the arena and then there's just that dead weird creature, and then just something's just crawling out, just slimy, and you just hear the sound effects, the gooey, and just staring at the moon or whatever, and then oh god,
that's so
it was
good,
so
man.
good
and even
and horrifying.
We mentioned we got Ludwig was number 5, right?
Yes, Ludwig was number 5.
That's my favorite like FromSoft fight ever. It's a to me kind of a culmination why I love Bloodborne is that particular fight. It's incredibly epic. The boss is like looks horrifying. That boss, by the way, is the one that gets used in like all the British Bloodborne memes, like just making fun of British people. Like I love that meme, and they just screen grab his face with his like fucked up teeth.
Yeah.
There's also there's also just some great like lore bits behind that boss fight and character too, and he's obviously attached to the like my favorite weapon as well. Like that's
the most used
that
FromSoft
whole
weapon.
yeah, literally, and the old Hunters in general is like my favorite piece of like DLC content ever made. Like
Same
it's
here.
yeah, like it's just like such a great like companion piece to that whole experience and all the
Apparently it is, with how
yeah.
many of those boss fights are on here.
He's also like Loki a filter for that DLC, because like
is.
he fucked me up really badly. Like when
a lot of if you go through that game and you beat it and then you decide, oh, I'm just going to start the DLC on New Game Plus, yeah, like good luck.
Dude, that is what I did, but I did on New Game Plus too, and oh my
Oh,
goodness,
shit.
it was difficult. like
So,
Lady Maria didn't give me as much trouble, but she was still tough. And then Orphan of Cause was just terrifying. I think I was having panic attacks like during the boss fight because of the sound effects and the screaming and the animation work of him just like running at you. I'm just like, oh my god, like.
Swings that big like what was it, like placenta or
yeah,
something
and he's just fucking slamming it on the ground.
Love it.
Like oh, and then he like rips like that one move where he like shoves his hand in it and then just throws like blood bombs or whatever. Like oh my god.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
all the Bloodborne, I mean, all the FromSoft DLC always ends up having like 2 to 3 of the hardest bosses in the whole game in it. So that makes me terrified and like slightly aroused for the Elden Ring.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. I didn't even think about that.
Because you think about like Dark Souls 1, like I don't know, I don't doubt any of the bosses are going to end up in the top 5. So I will shout out Artorias and Manus here.
Well, it's funny you say that, but we'll get there in a second.
Okay. There's love. Hey, I will be surprised if there's love, but yeah, Dark Souls 1, easily all like 3 or 4 bosses in that DLC are definitely considered the hardest in the whole game.
Yep.
Calamite, Artorias, Manus, Guardian, whatever, Sanctuary Guardian.
DLC, I realized as I was tallying votes that I had not actually done.
Any of them?
Damn.
Yes, you should. Yeah, that Dark Souls 1 DLC.
Just that one
awesome.
Dark Souls 1 DLC I've somehow managed to miss.
You should do it.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
fucking amazing.
Yeah.
you mentioned the DLC thing, and I realized my top 5 is like 4 of the 5 are DLC fights.
Yeah, there's a lot of DLC fights
Yeah,
on this list.
I think I had at least 4 or 5 as well.
The only of the bottom 7 that I voted on was the Nameless Keen, and that was
That's a great fight.
It is a great fight.
Wettiest boss fight I have ever done in a FromSoft. Like even the one that took me the longest, the last boss in Dark Souls 1, I don't remember the guy's name, but even though that one took me the most time, literally and in terms of effort, Nameless Keen was the one where I was just like, that was my zen moment of like really honing in on the patterns
Seeing
of
the
this
code.
fight,
Me too.
because I run dex builds, so I die in one hit.
Whoa.
Ooh.
I had like my build. I had a lot of health, and let's just say I'm not dying in one hit, but probably 2 or 3. So
Yeah, I think I had 2 hits on that fight, but
he did a
yeah.
lot of damage.
That was and then the dragon and just the fighting on the clouds. I love that arena. I love
So
so
good.
much about the visuals of that fight. It's like, of all the fights that I think of from Dark Souls 3, which one do I remember? Nameless Keen.
Yeah, that one sticks out to me. That fight I love, but I think I love the final fight in Dark Souls 3 a lot, and I do love an earlier one that just missed my top 10, which is like the Abyss Walkers, which are like earlier on in Dark Souls 3.
Those are great too.
That's
Witch
like
Watchers are
another
awesome.
I think that's another
voted for
boss
them.
fight of theirs that they kind of did again in another way later in another game, and I think in like Elden Ring or something. But
Abyss Watchers was such a Kino fight. I
that
love
was
that
a
one.
Kino fight. That's
Filtered
like
me the first time.
that fight in particular is like how they're able to kind of capture this. I don't know how to describe it, but just a sense of like I don't know how to describe it. Maybe cinematic, but just this like crazy awe with some of their fights, and just how
It's a very ambient fight.
yeah, like very ambient, and yeah, just dope as hell overall.
Yeah. And with that, we'll break into the top 3 now. And at number 3, with 42 points and 6 votes, was Artorias of the
Let's
Abyss.
My number 4.
He was my number 9.
That is my number. That's my number 1, baby.
Damn, let's go.
And he's now the reason why I should go back to Dark Souls 1 to get that DLC at some point.
That fight is goated.
That's my favorite fight from DS1, easily. So
Same
fucking
here.
good.
Yep.
It's crazy too, because it's like it's still Dark Souls 1, so it's like these bosses only Demon Souls is such a meme because the bosses only have maybe 3 moves, 3 or 4 distinct moves.
Correct.
And then you get to like Elden Ring, where Radon has like 75 different
Literally.
different like contextual thing. Like it's little mix-ups, but like it's so because it's so crazy once you like look at a boss kind of objectively, and you're like, even Sekiro, I think that's how I got through Sekiro so easily, is that I was just like logging the moves, and I was just like, okay, if this stupid ape does this, I'm just gonna run around. That gives me 2 free hits, then I run away, blah blah blah. You know, see the Matrix. But Artorias is just lore wise, he's one of my favorite bosses. The stuff with him and Sif is just some great prepare to cry content.
Cry. Yeah.
And he's just badass. I mean, it's so sick that it's like it's the classic meme of like, this guy is the most legendary sword fighter with his right hand, and you're fighting him with his left hand because his right arm is completely busted, and he's still throwing your shit in with his fucking weak hand. It's so sick. So he's awesome. He's definitely not the most technically like proficient, you know, super over the top Melania Slave Knight, just crazy, you know, jumping around all over. But he just has a great arena, great vibe, and he just has. It's just the culmination of Dark Souls 1, so I think that's why he's my.
It is.
I agree.
Peak.
Yeah, he thematically like ties that game together really well. That's one of I put that in my number 4, and I was like, maybe that's number 3 or maybe that's number 2. I'm like, it's just one of my favorite boss fights ever.
I almost wish he was the final boss of that DLC, because like he's like the first boss you fight, or the second, I think.
Right,
Yeah,
he's like the
yeah.
second you come across.
Yeah.
Really?
But he has a big filter. I mean, it depends on when you do the DLC. He can be pretty easy in some scenarios, but at like perfectly balanced level, he's a very, very fun fight.
The boss fight that follows it actually was the harder one for me, but I love Artorias.
Well, I have something to look forward to when I finally get back to that. And then at number 2 was my number 1
Oh, no.
pick.
Ooh.
And I think Arcity is the only other person who put this at number 1. We got to have a pretty big jump up in margin here, too, where it goes up to 48 points. The most voted for at 10 votes. So almost everyone had at least threw him a few.
Okay.
General Radon.
Oh, let's go.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Nice. That was my
He
number
was at
9.
number
but
5 for me.
Yeah.
He was also my number 9.
This is just such a... It's just one of the most the most memorable fight in the entire game for me, especially when you hit the middle of the fight and he just disappears.
Yeah.
And you're like, where'd he go? Where'd he go? And you'll look up and the sky darkens. That's the I never
Scared the
The
shit
shit
out
was
of
so
me.
fucking keen. Like back in my Elden Ring playthrough, right? Like when I was playing it early and like there were no spoilers. I walked in that arena. I was like, this is a really big arena. This is like almost like a small open world. And I just see him at the fucking distance just sniping me. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And then I see all the summon signs and I noticed you can do it for free. And then we were just all charging this guy and it was so fucking cool. And it was like I think it's like the only fight in the game where you have like 15 summons just wailing on this dude and he's just giga chatting it on that tiny horse and just whacking everyone.
That poor horse.
Dude,
That Chad horse.
The horse memes for that guy were so fucking funny.
Tiny horse, his tiny little legs, and this gigantic person. He was simultaneously the most threatening and most hilarious boss in the entire game. The way they struck the balance with that guy visually was just insane. It's like madness.
You know that meme of like, it's like kids had their fun, now it's real men's turn or whatever. Like I remember one of the first ones I saw was for Elden Ring was that meme format with the first image being like Avengers Endgame where they're all running at Thanos, and then the bottom one was like everyone running at Radon.
I always made sure to summon Alexander.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, yeah. It's fun. I do love that in that fight you could have like the most grand epic fight, or you could just make it harder for yourself if you don't want to summon anyone in. And
those guys were not doing. Trust me, those guys are not doing shit anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
They draw a few aggro, but they. It's so funny watching them destroy. You summon Patches in, and Patches immediately leaves. It's just like FromSoft knows that like they get it. They throw in shit like that where it's like it makes total sense that Patches would just not fight. Like he would just leave.
Obviously.
I remember on Twitter, I literally saw a video of that because I didn't know about that, and it was just a video of Patches like getting summoned and then just leaving. I was like, oh my god, he actually does that.
Yeah, and then the tech I had to develop for that one because I didn't do the summoning because I was just like, oh, this will probably something in my head was telling me this counts as like summoning an ally, and I don't want to summon any allies for this playthrough. So, other than when I noticed Alexander, I had to break it for at least that, but even most of the time he just died and then I gave up on it. But the tech I had to come up with for getting myself back on the horse to dodge hitboxes and just hopping on and off the horse to do stuff, hop on, cast spells, hop off, hit attack. It made me play the game in just such a technical way. And I felt so rewarding by the end of it. And I had put in like 4 hours to try to do it.
I remember it taking me a while as well. It did not that long, but it took me I sat there, and when I beat it, it was incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, Radon is kind of if you probably ask people to rank their like top 5 worst bosses, I would assume all 5 would be gimmick bosses, and I think Radon is when they finally like paired the gimmick with also maintaining like a good boss fight, because I feel like with all you jump into it, like you're allowed to have the horse in battle. You can summon a bunch of AI companion. Like it definitely plays out like a gimmick fight, but then there's actually like a full on
Yeah.
hulking boss, and like you can go through the standard boss motions of just dodge, attack, find your windows, blah blah blah. So it feels like they finally figured out how to like add the spectacle, because like something like the dragon in Sekiro is total. It's so cool on a spectacle level, but it's like it's kind of a joke for a fight itself. It's more like a gameplay mechanic versus just difficult battles. So it's cool that Radon finally felt like they figured out how to do it all into one. And that was the one Elden Ring boss that I did have on my list. Sorry, Melania.
They included like every gameplay mechanic in the fight. It wasn't just like, oh, here's this new gimmick mechanic. It was, here are literally all of the tools that we've given you over the course of the series for fighting a boss.
For sure.
Use them all. Summon everyone. Use all your spells. Get on the horse.
In everyone.
Everything. It was so cool.
You want to? We're talking about. We just talked about patches, and I'm just gonna share this meme that just literally showed up on my damn feed. I'm just gonna put it in the poll episode.
I will say, since we're not, we won't talk about him, but shout out Patches as a character.
Yes.
He's always in every FromSoft game. He's always a dick.
He's always an asshole. He's the worst.
I hate him, but you accidentally destroyed him in Elden Ring because you fight him in a cave and he just he comes out swinging. And so I was like, oh, like you probably just beat him, and then but then like at some point in the fight he like starts begging for his mercy, and by then I was in like a twin blade build, and I was locked into like an 8-hit combo at that point. So I couldn't even tell that he was starting to beg because my character was already locked into like a 3-hit combo that just destroyed him. And then I was like, oh shit. I like looked it up. I was like, fuck.
So his appearance in Bloodborne is what made me kill him, because I thought he was
a fucking enemy on the wall.
Yeah. He's on the wall.
Spider Patches is so cursed.
Yeah, he's on the fucking wall, and I went, what the fuck is that? And I killed him, and then he went, he says something to you, and I went, oh, that's weird. And then it totally dawned on me, like, way after I got past that point in the game where I was like, that was fucking Patches.
I love that character.
This will just be for Gremlin. Patches and NoHo Hank, same character.
All right, I absolutely don't understand.
I don't
either. Me neither. And I hope. I
hope you enjoy that, Grem.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to number one, we kind of thought about doing having people throw in their worst bosses, but no one actually did except for Never.
Okay.
So
Beta Chaos.
So just the four of us here. Never, what's your worst boss?
Man-Eaters. Dude,
Man-Eaters?
When I played Demon Souls Remake, that boss was so terrible. The AI they actually kept the bad AI, and I respect them for that. Like, the AI was terrible, the arena was terrible, running up to the boss was terrible, the fucking how unbalanced it was terrible. That is actually the worst fight for me. And then in Bed of Chaos, that's a number 2.
And Mokey, Beta Chaos.
Yeah, it's dog shit.
Sam, what's your least favorite?
Honestly, I'm just going with Beta Chaos. I didn't really think that hard about it because the highs are just, I think more of the highs than I do the lows most of the time. So Beta Chaos, yeah, that sounds about right.
Force damage. You have to slide down, take force damage. It's already
that
boss's AI aggroes you before you've even fallen, so it could already be mid attack when you land. It's so dog shit. The weird platforming,
horrible.
It's just a gamble. You will die probably 2 or 3 times. Even
I didn't want to attempt that. I didn't get that on my first attempt because of that shit.
Bad. The other gimmick fights are just kind of like boring and just like running through them. But this one is actively like you can't even get through it quickly for it being such a joke.
Probably breaks a lot of speed runs for people.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that is what most people would say is Bed of Chaos. Yep. Although I'm personally more in the I can't remember their names now that you just said it. Never was the first one you said.
Man-Eaters.
Yeah, those are probably the ones that, like, I think Bed of Chaos is kind of enough of a meme especially with how filtered my brother was on that one as well. He just kept going, "This worst boss fight in the game, worst boss fight in the game." As I'm going through it, to me, it was like I already sucked at every boss fight in the game, so having to run all this way and do all this stuff was no difference to me. It's just like, okay, here's another little gimmick thing. I figured it out, and we'll go. And then, dude, those man eaters were just so broken on that stupid
They
little
would
bridge.
just push you off over and over again. It was so unfair.
Like I want to suggest to my dad to play Demon Souls because he liked Dark Souls 3, except he hates the boss fights. He likes the exploration and the little fights and doing all that stuff. He doesn't like the boss fights. And Demon Souls would be a great little thing to suggest to him because it's just like, these boss fights are just little gimmicks and you can have fun with the exploration. But then there's man-eaters. It's just like sit in the way. It's like, oh, those guys suck so much. I hate them. They just ruin the whole flow of that entire section because that section is
that world.
So
World 3 is fucking amazing. Like standing like so high up and knowing you can actually legitimately fall down because there's an actual level down is insane. Like I always felt like uneasy going through that level because of that.
So cool.
So cool.
The color work and the lighting it just pops in HDR. All right. And so finally for the actual number 1 and the last boss I have recently completed.
Drum roll.
Sword Saint Ishin.
Oh shit! Oh shit! That was
50 points off of 6 votes.
That got number 1.
Yes. The people who like this one love it.
That's my number 6.
I was sweating because I was not hearing a single Sekiro boss when you were naming all 9. I was just like, no. The entire server is filtered. Like,
I have 2 Sekiro bosses, and they're both in my top 3.
There was a lot of Sekiro bosses voted for, but they were spread out through a lot of the different fights.
Yeah, I can see that.
Ishin covers, as far as I'm concerned, Ishin is every good part of a Sekiro boss fight combined into one fight. The filtering, the pattern finding, the cinematicness, and just the overall flow. The
ramp up is really good. Each phase it's just a nice little, it's just a seamless progression, and it gets more satisfying.
Yeah, and it seems, you heard me screaming bloody murder about the fact he had 3 health bars every time I started. But by the time I was like, okay, we're 30, no, what was I, like an hour in, 2 hours in? It's like, okay, I got it down to the point where those first 2 health bars are pretty much a given. And then like the 3rd health bar is a given. It's like, all right, now we're at the 4th health bar, and now it's just like, yeah, I understood. I finally understood by the end. It's like, it had to be this way, and I do not begrudge it otherwise.
Literally, it's great that like Genichiro is there to be like the little 2-minute jog on the treadmill before you start like the actual, like it's literally warm, like just get your hands warmed up, you know, just. And it's so funny too because that guy probably filtered you like
he did
16 to 20 hours before then, and then he just
literally did.
He exists for you to just run up, clown him for 30 seconds, get his phase over with, and then start the real fight. It's such a great little.
He's like he's a nice warm up, and to also charge up your live thingy. I forgot what they're called. Yeah, because that was the other purpose. Because you're definitely going to use all of them in Ishin, and if you can't get past Genichiro, it's like you're not worthy to face that man at that point.
Yeah. Genichiro's the first big filter. One of the big first filters of Sekiro is getting to that fight and seeing if you learned what the game's taught you so far. And then Ishin, the final fight of of Sekiro is just a culmination of everything by that point. And man, it's funny, like as you said, Connor, like it is brutally hard until you understand the actual like patterns and flow of everything. And I've played through Sekiro because to do the platinum, you basically have to play through the game like a few times, and I played through Sekiro like 3 or 4 times, and doing that final fight on repeat on repeat is hilarious. How well I was able to just like almost no hit it.
Yeah, like I said, it's basically FromSoft's first rhythm game about how that game flows. And Genichiro, when I first played the game in 2019, that was literally my experience. Was I got up to Genichiro, tried it for 2-3 hours, and got filtered out of my mind. And for it to literally be just this one phase of it's the same fight, it's not like that it's not like he's weakened for that fight or anything. It's the same fight, but now you just know the patterns, you know the dance. So it's pretty interesting.
Sekiro is it's like a really special game for me because like it's my favorite From Software game, and it's also my second favorite game of all time. Like I remember when I started it because I'm sure everyone in here was the same way. We were all expecting a Souls game. You dodge,
Ninja Souls.
you dodge, you know, because like up to this point, I honestly don't parry that much in From Software games. Like most of the time, I'm like evading
Same.
and like mashing the attack button and the power button and all that. And when I first played Sekiro, I actually thought the game was trash because I was like, dude, this is so unfair. I'm getting, I can barely take down their health. They have multiple health bars. And then I finally understood it at Gyobo. And then I got to Genichiro, and it took me like almost like 50 tries to do it. And that game has like so many filters. Like Genichiro was one.
Yes.
Guardian Ape was another. Owl was another. Like the corrupted monk was another.
Even the
corrupted
drunkard, the big drunk dude, like in one of the earlier.
Yeah, that's the guy.
And Lady Butterfly.
Hour of issues every time. Butterfly less so.
There's like so many like filters, but as I noticed, because after beating the game, I noticed that all of these bosses, they're so difficult, but they each teach you something and develop one of your skills, so that when you get to Ishin, you can apply what you learned from those bosses to him, because he's literally like a culmination of all the game's mechanics. He even has a gun that regular enemies like soldiers will shoot at you throughout the game, and even you have to deflect that. It's like it's so cool. He has Genichiro's lightning. Like he's got spear attacks. He's like fast as hell. He has a lot of power. He has multiple health bars. He's like he has like everything, and you need to. It's when you beat him, it's almost like you like graduated and like finally completed the like everything like leading up to it is just an exam, and then you finally like mastered it and graduated with your degree and beat the guy, and it was just so satisfying. And I that's also my favorite boss fight of all time, and I always kept wanting to like refight him, so I would always replay Sekiro. And before they gave the Game of the Year update where you could just fight any boss, I think I replayed Sekiro 17 times. Yeah, it is the most I've ever replayed a game, just so I could get to the Ishin fight again.
My brother's played the original Dark Souls that many times because it's his favorite game.
Yeah. I'm probably at around 15 DS1 playthroughs or so. I've played that game a ton.
My brother is a big replayer of that game as well. I don't know how many times he's actually finished it through, but it's like every couple of months he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to load the Xbox 360 version of the game as well, too, a lot of the times.
Damn.
Exactly.
He just replays that.
10 FPS white tone, baby.
No, like I kept my my PlayStation Cloud save like right before Ishin, so I could just go back and replay it that way without having to go through the whole game again, which was nice. But Ishin was actually my Slave Knight Guile fight. I got to the third phase on my first attempt and got just destroyed, and then I ended up actually pulling through on the second time because he chained 3 lightnings back to back.
Lucky
in the third phase. And so I beat him on my second attempt, and I was like full standing. Like once I got to the third phase again, I was in that like shaky hand zone, you know. But then I just kept doing the lightning parry, and just I did get a little lucky there. But that was just super satisfying to like just completely stomp his shit in a little bit. And I mean it was close. I was at like 1 or 2 gourds left, but just such a fun fight.
That lightning thing kind of happened to me on that last go
Yeah,
where I finally won. That was really funny though. If you got with you in particular thinking that was my last life. When
oh yeah, no, I didn't see that because you had regained your revive. I think after his first or second phase, and I didn't even notice.
Yeah,
so when you went down, I was like, no.
And I have that unfortunate tendency: is the closer I get to victory, the more I turn into a complete.
Oh yeah, the full aggro.
Oh, man, I'm so greedy.
one of my closest friends, I finally convinced him to go through Dark Souls 1, and that's like my life mission is just to get people to play that game. And so he finally did it, and he's the same way where it's like he'll get hit, and his first response is to roll forward and counterattack as opposed to roll back and take the healing frame. So it's always funny watching people have different play styles and whatever.
Yeah. Just gotta strike back. I gotta make them regret that as fast as possible.
Watching people go through a Souls game like the first time is always just really entertaining.
It's always entertaining.
Because they think it's just like any other action game, and then you realize, this is just built different, and I gotta play different, and learn differently. Like,
yeah. And it's funny how it encourages people to do that more so than a lot of games, where there's a lot of games that are actually just as difficult or more difficult, especially if you don't know how to play them, like me with Metroidvanias. But there was something about the way that they make it really upfront and give you just enough of a ramp where it's like, that you have to relearn something, and it's more clear that you're doing it. Something like that. All right. Well, with that, I did want to give some shout outs to the bottom barrel votes. Oh, no. These were the boys that got 1 point each. There weren't a whole lot of them from only one vote, obviously. And there was only 6 out of the 62 that ended up in this state. So we had Crucible Knight, which Duluthus voted for.
Wow.
I gave a vote to Screen Monkeys because I thought they were freaking hilarious. And I am the Screen Monkeys because they were the best. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and then the dude who's just stalking you.
Oh my god.
I
Very
love
on
those
brand,
guys.
Connor.
Amazing. Mokey gave a vote to Calamite.
Okay.
I don't know who that is.
Did our DS1 DLC boss just
the
very cool encounter. You get a sick cut. He's one of those where you have to do something before you can actually fight him. You get a very sick cutscene for that.
Nice.
And he's a fun dragon fight. They've done better dragon
dragons.
fights, but he's kind of the OG.
Niels gave Gwen a vote, and he was surprisingly the only one who voted
That's
for Gwen.
actually kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Pling, pling,
He did it for the music.
Yeah,
good finale. Good.
I hate that fight.
You can't parry?
I can't. I love it, but I hate it. I hate that fight.
So yeah, I did that fight on my first attempt. I parried like every attack, and my friend, who also loves Dark Souls 1, it took him and Gwen was like somehow like one of the hardest fights for him in the game because he couldn't parry.
Yep.
No, my friend he just beat that the other night, and it was literally just he literally stood there, parried him like 5 times, and beat him, and he was like that was fun. Like it looked so easy, but it was fun as hell.
Yeah,
I had a Black Knight halberd with big stats into it as well, so I only needed to parry him like 4 times to kill him. But just getting even 3 in was even the first one for me was such a struggle to do consistently. And that entire game across the 2023, the 12 years that it took me to actually beat Dark Souls 1, anytime I made any significant progress, my little brother was backseating me. I'm not afraid to admit that. I let him. Sorry, we'll use the nice. He coached me.
Coaching.
He coached you. Okay.
Yeah, he was coaching me the whole way. It pretty much was that because I only like half listened to him half the time. Like 4 Keens. Oh, go get all Havel's gear. I went in full decks with no armor.
Dark Souls is like that first kind of community. Well, it's not the first, but it's the first I feel like modern revival of like that community. Go on a forum, be like, I just did this and saw this. Did anybody else do that? And then they're like, no, but I tried this and this happened. And I feel like everybody gets a little like coaching from somewhere about some FromSoft game. It's always made to like share information and try out different things, which is super cool.
Yep. And then the last 2, Dragon God, who got 1 vote from Parrot. Parrot, for the record, has only played Demon Souls.
No respect, Parrot.
And Parrot is not.
Dragon God is like the OG gimmick fight, and it's very sick.
It's very much something that would be right up Parrot's
Yeah.
alley because he's not big
Visually,
on
it's
bosses.
really sick. I will admit, but mechanically, damn.
Yeah. And for the record, Parrot only gave it 1 point.
Okay, that is true. That is
If he
true. That is
voted
true.
for. And then my friend Gabe, who I also gave a chance to vote, voted for Estelle. So the big bug boy got 1 vote, which I'm a little sad he didn't get any more, but that's half my fault. So I can't.
That boss
blame
is
anyone.
very cool. That is definitely that's one of the sickest
No
designs in all of that game.
Yeah. It would have been probably cooler if I wasn't already at the point where the boss fight for me was throw rocks at face, it staggers, I stab in face over and over again.
Did
That rock throw spell was so broken.
Did anyone vote for the Guardian Ape?
Yeah,
Yes.
I did. That was my number 10.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Guardian Ape got 14 points. So he was actually one of the higher ones.
Yeah, that's good.
Dope.
Like top 15 maybe.
That's like one of my favorite, like, second act boss twists in a game.
I agree.
That fight. That when you approach the Guardian Ape, it's like, what? You just see him. And you're like,
I'm
oh,
literally
no.
fighting a giant ape, and
that is Harambe.
You're fighting Harambe, and not only that, he can leap into the air, put his hand in his ass, and then just throw his shit at you.
And throw shit at you, yes. And that doesn't even account for how crazy that fight eventually gets. But anyone who hasn't played Sekiro, go find
By the
that
way,
out for
fun
yourself.
fact.
Don't watch that donkey video. It'll spoil it.
Fun fact. He can fart, right? And I remember I threw a firecracker, and it actually exploded in my face.
Oh my gosh, I didn't think about that.
Actually, I was like, "There's no way, like, this is real," and it's real, like, yeah.
And they somehow just sneak the goofiest stuff into everything. I love it. And then the final thing for any of the voting is I will go over deviancy scores and take a solid, quick guess who the most normie of the voters was.
Me.
Yes.
Yeah.
You and Bella.
Okay.
Which surprised me. You were both at 32 deviancy points.
Nice.
Following that, which is incredibly surprising, Gremlin and I'm half wondering if I just did the calculations totally incorrect, but yeah, Gremlin and I were 34 points.
Falling in line.
Followed by Alex and Sam. And then Mokey Alex and Sam at 39, Mokey at 43. So we've already covered the 4 of us here. So I kind of picked the hosts correctly, I think. And then Niels at 44, which is kind of interesting because I think he got through like all of them fairly recently. So he even played through Dark Souls 2, I think, in order, which is impressive. Brandon at 47, Sean at 49, my friend Gabe at 54, which is no surprise. Parrot at 55, Delufus at 57, and then probably the real surprise here, the one with the most deviancy, with a margin of 12 points over the last position. Arcity was 69 points.
What a
Very
number.
Nice.
Yep. All right. So we have about 10 minutes left. I did want to give you guys a chance to. Oh, you know what? I should do this one first, since this will be quicker. This will be fairly quick, and then we'll see how much time we have left. Waifu picks.
Everyone else go before me.
All right.
This was an optional. This was an optional thing, so not everyone put them in, but we got a few 10. Surprisingly, it wasn't until the last 2 people who gave a vote that we actually got any duplicates. It was all unique up until the last.
Oh, damn. Okay.
We had Brandon with Ronnie.
Okay.
Me with the Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3.
Okay.
Delufus with Melania. Nice. Gremlin with Doll. No surprises there.
Wait, who?
Gremlin with the doll from Bloodborne.
Oh, the doll. Gotcha.
Mokey with the Maiden in Black. And then
Nice choice.
Never and Alex, who might be the same person. Were put
Wow, no,
once
so no. I wonder who they picked.
Emma. I think you guys might be the same people. It's only your deviancy score that's giving me any sort of pause, but that might be part of the play. I also invited Alex onto this episode. He's not here, but never is.
I'm
So
representing him.
can't
Weird
prove they're
some
not the same
scheduling
person.
conflict or something.
Yeah,
Alex couldn't make it, but never
you know,
could.
wonder how that happened.
Apparently, I'm also Mr. Matty Plays. Apparently,
apparently. And then the one true hero who got 2 votes and who honestly should have been the true like mainstay everyone picked waifu, Solaire, who got votes from Bella and Sam.
Woo!
That's fair.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Objectively correct.
so Emma and
Let's
Solaire
go.
are
Bella-
tied.
Bella,
Yeah.
if you're listening, you live up to your namesake of Bella the Bass.
Bella the
Yes. Great results all around from these votes. And with that, I wanted to give. We'll probably try to keep it on the shorter side, but I wanted to cover, if you haven't said it already, what were you guys' most memorable moments from the series?
God, someone else go.
I can start if you want.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
For me, the epitome of everything with FromSoft was the time my brother and I started doing some co-op action in Dark Souls Remastered shortly after it came out, that version. We went and we got those dragon stones that let you transform your body into parts of a dragon, right?
Oh, yeah.
We went and sequence broke to go get those 3 pieces as fast as we could before we even done the gargoyles fight. And we started doing PvP. We started it. I don't remember if we were waiting for people to invade us or if we were invading other people. I think we were waiting for people to invade us, but we sat there and baited invaders in to this little corner right outside the church between the there's the bridge to the bonfire and then the church you enter for the gargoyles fight. And then just to the right of the stairs, there's this little cubby space. We kept tricking people into that cubby space, and then we went full dragon flames on them.
Oh my god, you're cooking.
They could not do anything. They just got stagger locked to death, and we just had like 3 hours of giggling to ourselves, torturing people in multiplayer. Which is something we didn't even cover in this entire episode, was the fact that there's PvP. And that's hilarious.
That's its own episode. Like of just silliness. I guess just memorable moment. I'm gonna go for a meme answer. I remember pinning on the cone hat in Bloodborne, and then like the big metal one, and sliding down the ladder, and it just like ding 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 ding, like the helmet just ricocheting, just hitting every single piece of the ladder. Like they actually included that in.
I forgot about that. That was so funny.
That just told me that the devs have a good sense of humor. But that's the answer today.
Nice. Never Mokey. Anything from you guys?
Mokey, you want to go?
Yeah. My favorite moments with these games are probably when they watching it click for somebody, whether it's one of my friends or somebody else or whatnot. It's always the best. Seeing somebody kind of reliving your first experience through somebody else is always just, it's super satisfying for me. It's not like a specific game moment, but it's always cool when somebody that might not necessarily be into this type of game eventually gets into it, or somebody that is into it is going through one of the games for the first time and kind of discovering things on their own. It's always awesome hearing other people's experiences with the games.
It's definitely true. There was a lot of that after Elden Ring, and that was really fun. There was a good 3 weeks there where it was just all the discussion online was people discovering that game, especially the new people. It was really fun.
So for me, I already said my favorite moments. The Elden Ring discovery thing, beating Bloodborne for the first time, and beating a FromSoft game for the first time is another. beating Ishin for the first time, but I'm gonna give a new one, and I want to build off of what Mokey just said. So with Sekiro, I got two friends to try it out, and when they got to the final boss, they were so overwhelmed, and they just said, "There's no way I can do this," and I just kept like telling them and coaching them like, "You can do this, you can do this." And one of the most satisfying things was like after like each of them like doing like 50 attempts and like 2 nights of playing, like they finally did it, and they were like screaming so loud, and they couldn't believe they actually like beat this guy, and that was like really awesome and satisfying to see, just helping someone out like beat something that they thought that they couldn't beat, but they overcame it. Because that to me is like one of the special things with From Software games is like everyone goes into these games thinking they can't do it, they can't beat it, it's too hard, and then when they finally overcome it and beat it, they start getting to the rest of the series, and it gives them like more confidence too.
Was I the second friend or the third friend who was like, I can do it, but I hate it?
You are probably the third or the fourth friend, because I've done this for a couple people, but like the first two, the two I was mentioning were actually the first two I got in, and then I had a third friend who also who tried it, and he also thought he couldn't do it, but he did it, and I believed in him.
Yeah, that was a very fun stream to do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in about 2.5 minutes, it's going to hit the cutoff point for the free version of Zencastr. So I think we should go ahead and close it out. I was really glad to have you guys on. This ended up going even better than I expected.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you.
This is great.
Yeah, lots of good discussion. And yeah.
Praise
Thank
the
you all.
sun.
Praise
the sun.
Thank you all for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourselves just as much as we did. Sayonara.